Hello, friends. I'm no therapist, but I'm your host, Stephanie Goodman. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a woman of faith. Often friends ask me how I have a successful marriage while blending families and staying optimistic in life. This podcast features people with real-life stories about success in relationships and triumph over trial. My father, Lynn Leamaster, returns to the studio. Now, he's a former hypnotherapist, and we get deep as we talk about the use of words and how they can enlighten our subconscious mind. Welcome to another edition of I'm No Therapist, but today I have a special guest in my home. This man has been part of my life since my first breath. He has taught me many things about this life, and I have thoroughly enjoyed being able to have a relationship with him, to have a friendship, and we all have a little Mr. Miyagi in our lives, and I would like to introduce to you mine. Dad, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Steph.
Dad, will you, if you look back on your days, I know that you and I talk a lot about words, as we began this conversation with correcting me of
growing up.
Growing up.
Okay.
This is my life, people. I have to watch my words on a constant basis, but it's good. It's good for me to think about what I'm saying in this life. So share with me, if you can, what is an experience that you had that started you being more mindful of the words that you use?
I would say when I started looking at words and the effects that they have on us at a subconscious level. I shared with you the one experience that I had with the hypnotherapy where I was working with someone who was struggling with the idea that they had been in a car accident and the person in the other car died. Mm-hmm. And as we were going through that process with him, regressed. And one of the interesting things about the subconscious memories we have is that in a trance state, we can reach in and start to digest or dissect all the many aspects of the event that caused the trauma, so that we can begin to address some of the mistakes we made in our thinking at that time, so that we can then bring our awareness to that situation that we lacked in the event.
Okay.
That's what causes trauma, is that our awareness of where we are and who we are and what's happening gets stripped, and we tend to focus only on the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're blinded by the experience.
Exactly.
We can't, as you said, I think it was interesting that you used the word digest.
Yeah, assimilate it. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was working with this person who had the car accident, and he made the statement that this lady was killed in the accident. And when I was working in the hypnotherapy in that office, I really feel like there was a presence or an entity that was there to assist in the healing process. And sometimes I would just get a flash of intuition, and I would follow that intuition, and some amazing things came out of that. But in this particular case, the idea was that person was not killed. Killing involves intention. That person died as a result of injuries because of the accident. There was no intention. And that experience got me to really thinking about words. When people are interested in getting rid of weight, if they're saying, I want to lose weight, the subconscious has an opinion of losing, and it doesn't like losing. So when you're constantly telling it, well, I'm going to lose weight, it's resisting the process. But if you help the subconscious understand, I want to drop this weight. I want to relieve myself of this weight. And we may get into it later, but that's one of the ideas that came to me about enlightenment. We're all looking for enlightenment in our life, or I'm not going to say all of us are looking for it. A lot of us are looking for enlightenment.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And primarily when people think of enlightenment, they're thinking of light, the illumination. But part of that illumination is having the ability to drop some of the things that we think are important matters in our lives and literally unburden ourselves from the connection that we have to those traumas, the judgments, opinions, expectations that we tend to attach to our thoughts and our emotions.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never broken down the word enlightenment in that way. I do think of it in a way of light, being that I can see clearer, my brain is thinking, I understand better than I did before. Like just right now, I feel like I have been enlightened by the vocabulary definition of enlightenment. But to let go of things that are weighing you down, that's a whole nother concept. I love that.
Yeah, people, when they're talking about enlightenment, a word that they will often use in association with that is ascension.
Oh, interesting.
And in both cases, it's a matter of releasing ourselves from the burdens we've created through our mistakes in thinking.
And our mistakes can become very physically heavy. And I know from you, I learned that illness comes from holding on to burdens, right?
Well, the word disease is literally dis-ease.
I loved when you taught me about that. That really changed the way that I looked at illness. It made me question what's happening inside. Dis-ease.
Yeah, because we talked on the phone the other day about the way that I tend to view consciousness is the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the paraconscious mind. And I associate that with mind, body, and spirit. So the body part of that is handled by the subconscious. It is the part of our consciousness that's responsible for our body. The reason that we get engrams, the reason that we get memories that cause us distress and misguidance is because the subconscious has made a memory of something that is traumatic or happy, and it tries to duplicate those experiences in order to avoid future pain,
yes,
or in order to encourage future joy, happiness, fulfillment.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
But those memories are generally being misguided because of our prejudice in that moment. Because I have a statement that almost a mantra to me, and that is No-Joe-free-mage.
Yeah.
The Joe is the judgments, opinions, and expectations that we normally attach to a thought or emotion. So when we do that, the word adulterate literally means to add something that was not part of the original essence, or to take away from something that was part.
Wow.
So when we adulterate our thoughts, that creates a problem to us ever being able to resolve truth in that experience or that memory.
So interesting that you gave me that definition, and honestly, the commandment "Thou shalt not commit adultery" has a new meaning because it's self-inflicted. It's what we allow into our lives that was not part of the plan, right?
It's an interesting way of using that understanding as it begins to unfold. Yes.
Sure, and I'm sure that this is adultery and adulterating can be taken differently depending on what chapter of life you're in, what experiences you're having, and what knowledge are you gaining.
Exactly. But if you're aware of that process, then you can sometimes catch it as it's happening and use that as a stepping stone to further your understanding of yourself and how you are perhaps responding in an inappropriate way to that event. The problem with the subconscious having such an influence in our lives is that we're reacting to the memory, and the subconscious doesn't know the difference between then and there and here and now.
Okay.
Okay? To it, everything is here and now. So when it's running an engram, when it's running a memory of something that was traumatic to it,
Like killing someone
or
in an accident,
or any kind of trauma,
okay,
that experience becomes real to the subconscious in that moment, and what's happening now is being overshadowed by that memory, so that the subconscious, your body, your emotions, you're responding to that memory and not to the current environment or the current circumstance.
Yeah.
And so you can overreact to what's happening, thinking that because the subconscious is having such an influence on your perception.
Okay, so for me, that definition for me brings up triggering, right? Where there is something that comes up, whether it's past, future, what have you, it is stuck in that energy, that experience. For instance, you and I experienced a growth that I have had in my life from my first marriage ending until now, where a particular piece of music would take
Trigger
over
you.
me.
Yeah.
It would not allow me to react in a rational way. Like if I heard that music playing anywhere, if it was in the mall, if it was in the store, if it was on the radio, I did everything in my power to get out of there. Even leaving a grocery cart of food because I had to get out of there. It was flight for me. And for years, this song haunted me until, I've been doing some inner child work with a wonderful lady. Her name is Amber Goody. And it's been a really interesting experience for me to embrace some of the teachings that you actually have taught me since I was a young one, in embracing the life around me and understanding more of my part in the world, and taking those teachings and remembering those same kinds of concepts and implementing it now in the childhood memories that I have and the adult that I've become through the experiences that I've had. I feel like it took me many, many years to have an understanding of what that trigger message was. And when I broke it down with you on the phone, I realized that triggering was not meant to haunt me. It wasn't my enemy. What it was my subconscious telling me that I count, and that the message of this music no longer had an influence on me because I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I was protecting myself from not hearing that message. Suddenly, that song has no more power over me. And I'm proud to be me. I'm proud that my subconscious recognized that it was time for me to stand up and do something for me. And I'm so grateful for leadership and those that are able to help me through those situations so that I can grow through them and be able to teach to others what I've learned.
Thank you. As you were talking there, it occurred to me, one of the words that fascinates me is remembering. There are two aspects to remembering. The one is just memory and just, okay, yeah. But if you break it down, you are remembering something. So you're taking things that are parts and putting it together, and then bringing it forward and saying, oh, that's my memory of something.
Yeah.
But the process of remembering also gives you the freedom, if you're willing to accept it, to plug something in that's different and get a different perspective of it. And I'm going to share a personal experience that I had with learning to forgive. Okay. As a young person in school, we had an assignment that was to write a paper on Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
And I put all kinds of creative energy into that project. And when I had completed it and handed it in, I had high expectations.
A plus,
A plus,
plus.
all kinds of stickers. Although we didn't have stickers in my time.
Man.
Anyway, I submitted this paper with high expectations.
Yeah.
And I was very proud of what I had done.
I think we can relate to that.
Well, the paper came back to me as a D. And there was a note from the teacher that said, and basically told me that I had plagiarized the material and not given credit. Well, it was all my own efforts. So it caused, the way I reacted to that was that this teacher was evil. Oh man, did you miss the boat? And I carried that through college and through a good part of my life. When I would see him, I would react internally to that anger.
Yeah, I can understand that.
When I learned this technique of forgiveness, then it was amazing how my perspective of that experience shifted. Because I realized, okay, for him to think that I had plagiarized it was an indication that I did a pretty darn good job of bringing my understanding, my imagination, and so forth into that paper that I created.
Right.
And then there was another aspect of that that made it even more difficult for me to forgive him. Not only did he put that on my paper, but he came to my parents' home and discussed this fact that I had plagiarized this and presented it as being mine.
Wow. I had no idea.
And that added to the
evil.
When I
intent.
shifted that and literally was willing to forgive myself and him, what came to me about that was an amazing, compassionate thing for him to be concerned enough about my future that he would come to my parents' home and let them know, this could cause problems for him in the future.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Even just sitting right here, hearing the story, like you have carried me through my own experiences of people that have read me wrong, right? That have done me wrong. And yet also sharing that insight of he cared so much for me. And also my paper, I was more intelligent than they were expecting me to be at that age. Which is a compliment now when you look back on that.
Exactly. But I could never have that perspective until I was willing to forgive myself from the opinion that I had of that experience.
Wow.
I'm going to share that technique with you, okay?
Please do. Yeah.
All right. So you can see the mirror over there. Look at that mirror. Okay? And keep your focus on the mirror.
Okay.
Okay? Now, as you're looking at the mirror, soften your vision. There you go. Did you feel the shift in your energy as you softened your vision?
Yeah. I didn't care as much of the details. It just was.
Okay? All right. Now, imagine that your heart has eyes. And it is viewing the world.
Yeah.
When you can use that same technique of softening your vision, then it opens up that part of your energetic being that can allow for yourself to make mistakes and for others to make mistakes. And for that to be all right. I don't know who it was that gave me the idea.
Yeah.
But the idea was that when I'm evaluating the importance of something, to ask myself, will this make a difference a year from now? Will this impact my life a year from now?
Huh.
And if it won't, then I can ease up my perspective of it, my judgments, opinions, and expectations.
Okay. That is a really interesting statement to ask yourself, because really, do I want to hold on to this for a year? Do I want to hold on to this for 10 years? Right?
Or in my case, 50.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was always frustrating to me because, I had done the hypnotherapy, and the idea of, doctor, heal yourself.
Did you experience hypnotherapy yourself, or did you just dive into being a hypnotherapist?
Well, I got extremely interested in it as I studied it. Then I went through a process of certification for it. And in that process of certification, there were times when we were hypnotized so that we would experience it ourselves, so we would appreciate what our clients would be experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some amazing things that came out of that personally, but the interest that I had those experiences because my interest was so piqued by it.
And you found it on the internet? Did you YouTube it?
No. Oh, no. There was no internet when I was doing that. It was just research in books.
Okay.
And I think that it was part of the intention that my soul had for this life experience.
Uh-huh. I love the statement that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that we do open ourselves up to that next level of receiving the teacher in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So hypnotherapy caught your attention, caught your heart, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see it being used in a way of helping family members, friends, or was it for yourself? What do you think drew you to have a passion for hypnotherapy?
Chiron was an amazing healer, but he had a wound that he could not heal.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of Chiron was that the reason that he was seeking to heal others was because he was seeking to heal his own wound.
Oh, yeah.
So, to some degree, that was probably motivation for me.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said before, I really think it was part of my soul's intention to explore that and to learn from it. I had such amazing insights as a result of that. And I learned to appreciate that we all have our challenges. Everyone, in fact, while I was doing the hypnotherapy, I had a dream where an entity appeared to me and taught me that everyone I know, everyone I ever knew, and everyone I'd know in the future have their own challenges.
Okay.
The degree to which their challenges and the degree to which they allow the challenge to be evident to others is going to vary. But everyone has their challenges. And that was a very interesting dream. That entity took me to several people and showed me what was behind their behavior, behind their challenges.
Oh, that would
And
be so powerful.
It was an amazing dream, but it shifted my perspective. As a youth, I would say the attitude that defined me was fanaticism. I was fanatic with virtually everything. And that experience and the hypnotherapy and some of the other things that I studied allowed me to release my grip of fanaticism and to just kind of soften my vision, soften my heart. That's how I see it now because of the experience with learning to soften my heart as a technique for forgiveness.
So in other words, you're not focused on the details anymore and you're not taking things personally. You're just letting it be.
Correct.
I could see that brings a lot of insightful peace and calm. One technique that I learned from our dear friend John Canan is to step back and just kind of say to myself, whatever situation is, that's interesting, right? And in my mind, that takes me almost out of the realm of the heaviness of the earth, but kind of brings me up into a light of just observing.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yes. And that, from my definition, that's the paraconscious awareness.
Okay.
That pulls, that paraconscious observes.
So we talked about the conscious, which is the mind.
Yeah, that's the part of us that's always thinking.
Which is the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the paraconscious, which is
awareness.
Enlightenment.
That's where our growth comes from.
Wisdom.
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the hypnotherapy that I participated in, my objective was to get the paraconscious of the person I was working with to direct the subconscious to correct mistakes in its thinking.
Okay. So habits, addictions?
Well, habits, the subconscious, because it has so many things that it's doing, if it can reduce its load of attention, it will do that. So it forms a habit so it no longer has to think about it.
Okay.
When you're going to learn to drive, your conscious mind is very involved. But what's really happening, the really significant part of it is the subconscious is developing habits. Hopefully, they're habits that will be beneficial to you in the future.
Oh.
But it takes over so that you can now drive and you're not constantly thinking about changing lane and turning on the signal and checking your speed and all the other things that you do that to some degree your subconscious is doing that.
Okay.
It's aware of it and it's doing it. It just created a little habit. like a little robot that's part of that driving.
The
and it just says,
auto drive, right?
yeah, cruise control.
That is so fascinating. You're right. There are so many times that I'm driving from one point and I get to another, and half the time I look back and go, how did I even get here? I don't even remember getting here, but here I am.
Yeah.
But driving in the beginning. Now, I just graduated from teaching the last of my nest to learn how to drive. Oh, man. Can I just say, for me, and maybe not for anyone else, but for me, teaching a teenager to drive is worse than potty training. I'll go back to potty training anytime over teaching a teenager to drive. It is so scary for me. And do I go into triggers and PTSD? Even right now, my hands are sweating with the idea of a teenager getting behind a machine.
Yeah. Well,
Because we drive so unconsciously all the time. And here we are teaching someone else young in their youth to drive unconsciously.
my perspective of that, one of the most cherished memories of my youth was learning to drive from a dear, dear man who allowed me to learn to drive his Volkswagen Beetle.
Okay.
A standard shift, of course.
Uh-huh. Do you remember what color?
It was as a light tan.
Okay. See? It's
But
imprinted.
he had such patience with me learning. The process, Kels can probably relate to this. The process of learning to drive a standard is not something that you learn overnight. You just
To
have
coordinate those feet
to. Yeah.
and the gear shift. The hiccup.
But that man and his approach to that influenced me to such a degree that when I was teaching you and when I teach my grandchildren to drive, I have that tolerance, realizing it takes time to learn. You're not going to know how to do it overnight.
So you mean all this time that I've been stressing and sweating bullets, I could have had you teaching my kids to drive?
Well,
Missed that boat.
if you bring them up to Ogden.
Yeah, that's probably the reason why. And then they'd beg me to drive all the way back home, and I wouldn't be so... Anyway,
That's
so
so
they
funny.
have to learn to drive on their own from friends and others that are not fully invested in that energy. So back to auto correct or auto drive. As we're talking about the subconscious and habits, I'd like to dive into that a little more, and possibly addiction if you have an additional insight into addiction.
My experience with addiction is that because it's associated with the subconscious, there are all kinds of expectations on the emotional level that are attached to it. But because of its association with the subconscious, it literally creates enzymes in the body that are associated with that expectation. So the addiction is not just something that can be handled emotionally, mentally. There's an actual physical aspect to it, and we have to acknowledge that physical aspect of it and allow ourselves to be human.
Okay.
One of the things that makes it difficult for someone that's struggling with an addiction is that they'd like to just have it over. Many times it's not something that I want to do. It's something that I feel like others expect of me.
Okay.
And
can you give an example of that?
Let's take alcoholism.
Okay.
Okay. There's a physical aspect to that, but there's also a lot of shame that people feel with that.
The shoulds, right?
The shoulds.
Uh-huh.
And if someone, and this was true of anything that anyone came that was seeking help with hypnotherapy, the degree to which the hypnotherapy would work as a tool depended on the motivation they had. What is the why of that I'm here?
Okay.
If I'm trying to satisfy somebody else,
like in a
become
marriage,
the person I should be,
okay,
then you will get so far with that, but
the why isn't
longevity will not be sufficient to take you through. Anytime you're trying to change a habit, you'll get to a point where that habit is going to challenge you because of all the investment you have in it.
Oh, interesting.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you're going to be challenged by that habit because you're in the process of forming a new habit. And that new habit is going to take energy away from the old habit. And that old habit doesn't want to let go.
Right. And it's something that our subconscious hasn't experienced. And so it's going to put out that natural barrier of protection.
That habit consists of a lot of opinions.
Yes.
About yourself, about others, about life. And those opinions are part of the motivation behind the habit.
Okay, that's interesting.
The outward manifestation may be there, and for a period of time that will be sufficient. But like say, at a point, the habit is going to challenge the behavior. And if the motivation is not personal enough, then the changes won't occur.
In other words, the why. Okay, will you share an example of maybe one of your clients that you learned this from, that the why must come from within?
Virtually every one of the people that I worked with was an example of that.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons that I stopped doing the hypnotherapy, is because I realized that we have the tools within ourselves, within our beingness, to create the changes that are important to our lives, that are truly important in our lives.
Okay.
That the hypnosis was like a tool. But the problem was people expected the tool to do the work for them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And to some extent, it was a valuable tool.
Correct.
But when it came to actually creating the changes, when the habit challenged the behavior, the hypnosis was not sufficient to create the change. They had to create the change. They had to choose the change. It had to be clear in their mind and in their soul why it was important.
Were you able to help these clients in a direction of finding their why?
That was a major part of what I did.
Okay.
In the therapy. A lot of what we did was to get them to trust their paraconscious in creating the changes that they were looking for. And it was amazing how often when somebody came in and said, well, this is what I want to do. I want to lose weight.
Okay.
Okay.
Want to quit smoking.
Yeah, quit smoking, whatever it is.
Right.
But when we started actually getting into the therapy and getting the subconscious to communicate the real issues, the weight loss or the smoking, that was just a convenient way to present themselves as saying, oh, I need help. But the real issues were generally traumas that they were trying to address or handle or assimilate, and they didn't have the tools in that moment. The problem with our decisions is that our decisions can blind us from our choices. How would you interpret that?
Can blind us from our choices. I have to think on that one for a little bit. Our decisions can blind us from our choices. If I were to answer that in a way that I knew, I would say that depending on what kind of energy or emotion we put into making those decisions will give us different choices. For instance, I use the mantra that I feel was detrimental in my life as a single mom, and that is, experiences in life will make a man better or bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I add, it's my choice.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions and the choices were involved, that I chose whatever came my way, whatever I experienced, good or bad, whatever that was there to make me a better person, no matter what it was, because that's how I chose to look at it,
mm-hmm.
to soften my gaze on things.
Exactly. And that may be a different way of appreciating the difference between a decision and a choice. Decisions are things that we make in advance, telling ourselves, okay, when this condition presents itself, this is what I will do.
Okay.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
But when that situation actually occurs, you may not have the choice that you had the decision about.
Okay.
The choice is what presents in that moment.
Uh-huh.
And in that moment, if you make a choice based on, my perspective is that we will always make the best choice we can in that moment based on the resources that we have in that moment.
Yeah.
So if we've been blinded by our subconscious memory to something, we don't have our full resources in that moment.
Okay.
So if we make a choice that contradicts or opposes a decision we had in the past, then that choice becomes something that we can judge as being insufficient or incorrect because it's conflicting with the decision we had in the past.
And we put judgment of being right or wrong when actually it's insufficient knowledge.
Yep.
Or experience.
You remember I shared with you the little mantra I have of Ilasu Akda?
Yes. Yeah.
I lack sufficient accurate data.
Oh. Say it again for me.
Ilasu Akda.
Ilasu Akda.
I lack sufficient accurate data.
Okay.
So if that is the case, not only do I lack sufficient accurate data to make a judgment about you or your choices, I also lack sufficient accurate data to judge my own choices. So the idea of shoulds,
yeah,
if we can be aware of that word in our thinking, and especially in our vocalization, and catch it, like we were talking about the difference between I and you when we're talking about an experience.
Okay.
If we can catch that and say, instead of should, I should do this, or you should do this, if we can shift it from outside influence to internal influence and say, I could do that, or you could do that.
That gives choice.
It gives the point of power back to the person making the choice.
That's so interesting. Like, I can feel the difference of that. The shoulds, I feel, is heavy on the shoulders, and the coulds comes from within.
Yep. Yeah. And that seems like it can seem insignificant. It could be just say, oh, well, that's just semantics.
That's a word. And that's a letter. Right?
Yeah. But your subconscious has a different perspective of what words can mean.
Okay.
Like we were talking about enlightenment.
Yeah.
And it isn't either or, it's both. And it's then expanding from that level of perception and understanding that gives us more choices in the future.
That's so interesting. You know, before I start a podcast, before I start an interview, I get this giddiness in my gut. And you could call it stage fright. You could call it worry, anxiety. I have learned through the course of my life that anxiety and excitement are of the same level of energy, and that your subconscious can't tell the difference. And so when I feel that bubbliness in my gut, I will immediately start saying things like, I am so excited. And then I have learned to go to, for instance, I have already imagined what the ending of our podcast looks like.
Ooh.
And I have walked away just elated to have this time with you. I've already planned out in my subconscious how I'm going to feel when it's all done.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it. I choose to be excited about it and optimistic.
Okay. Cool.
Would you like to go into kind of the meaning of words? I know when I was younger, and I still have that specialty of spelling in my mind.
I love it.
I would come to you and ask, Dad, how do you spell this word? Because I couldn't figure out what it was. I just wanted to get this assignment done. Just tell me what to say. How do you spell like tomorrow? I can never get the word tomorrow, right?
Okay.
I still suffer on saying subliminal. See? I would come to you and ask you how to spell something, and you would immediately direct me to the dictionary. I don't know, Steph. Go look it up. Man, I rolled my eyes so loud. I'm sure you could hear me rolling my eyes. Because, man, I hated hearing that sentence. Go look it up. Well, if I knew how to spell it, then I would.
Well, I bumped that. There was one idea that I wanted to cover before we finish.
For this episode.
For this episode. But that is the word the.
Oh?
THE. When we're looking for the answer, or we're looking for the truth, we're looking for the anything. The problem with that is that it limits us to that little sphere where the answer is. And anything outside of that, we tend to ignore or to perhaps underestimate its value.
Or pay no attention to.
So if we can catch ourselves with the word the and expand that into a or an, then it gives us freedom to explore everything outside of the.
Instead of the answer, we're looking for an answer.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you can feel the shift in that the is a pinpoint answer. There's only one answer for the.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, but maybe we can do another podcast another time and kind of explore that, but we're out of time now.
We certainly are. I'm so sad that we're out of time. As you can tell, we could talk for hours and hours. And actually, that's one thing that I wanted to share with you. I was able to talk to my sister Stacy and to Jessica and Leonard, and they all kind of emphasize the same kind of message, and that is that they deeply appreciate that they could talk to you about everything and anything, that you're a compassionate listening ear, and that they consider you more than just a dad, but a companion and a friend. And I absolutely agree with that. I love that you choose to show up in love and light and understanding, and whatever it is that we're doing, you definitely cheer us on, and you celebrate in what we are doing and who we're becoming. How lucky we are to have a man like you at our side, who sometimes is embarrassing in public.
I can vouch for that.
Whether you're a wedding or a funeral or a fine restaurant, Dad's going to find some way to make you laugh or turn red. But the thing that he does is that he reminds us how joyful life is, and to play. Like you said, he's not grown up.
No.
And I envelop that in my own life. And I think that I feel that it has made my life richer to be open to people having their experiences and allowing me to be part of that, and hopefully bringing a little bit of light and enlightenment and joy. So thank you, Dad, for being here.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe, share, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Please comment because I would love to hear about what you think and what you want to see in the future. I'm no therapist, but I am your host, Stephanie Goodman.